My name is Eugene. I'm 84 years old. And last Christmas I ate alone. Not because I had no one. I have 6 children, 10 grandchildren, a phone that works perfectly fine. I sat at a table I'd set for 2, just in case, with a plate of food I'd made too much of, listening to the apartment stay quiet. Marcus called around noon, said the roads were bad. Calvin sent a message that said he was thinking of me, which is something people say when they've decided not to come. Renee called at 9 that night to say she was sorry, her voice careful the way voices get when they're managing guilt from a distance. I thanked all of them, said it was fine, said I was tired anyway. I washed the dishes, dried them, put them back in the cabinet, sat in my chair by the window. The street outside was empty. One of those quiet nights where the cold keeps everything still. And I thought, sitting there in that particular silence, when did I become someone my children visit out of obligation? When did I stop being someone they couldn't wait to see? I didn't have an answer. That was the part that sat heavy. I spent most of my working life in buildings. Maintenance, operations, and the kind of work where things break and you fix them before anyone notices. I was good at it, better at keeping things running than at saying what I needed. That's not a complaint. That's just a fact about the kind of man I became. And when retirement came and the shifts stopped, I figured family would fill the space. That the years I'd spent showing up, providing, handling things, that those years had built something, a foundation, something that would hold. I was wrong about that. Not completely, but wrong enough. So I did what any reasonable man does when something isn't working. I tried harder. I started calling more. Sunday mornings, Tuesday evenings, whenever it felt like enough time had passed that calling again wouldn't seem desperate. I'd ask about the grandkids. They'd give me headlines. Isaiah's doing well in school. Malik made the team. Everyone's busy, Dad. You know how it is. Yes, I knew how it was. I also knew what it felt like to be a name on a list of things to get to later. I started keeping my calls short. Figured if I made it easy, quick, low demand, no lingering, they wouldn't dread picking up. 10 minutes. 12. Just enough to say I was still here. I'd hang up and sit with the phone in my lap for a while afterward, the way you sit with a meal that didn't satisfy. One Sunday, Anthony didn't pick up. I called twice. Left a message the second time. He called back 4 days later, apologized, said his week had been brutal. I said it was fine. He said he'd call more often. He didn't. I didn't say anything about it because what would I say? You didn't call? You forgot? What good does that do? I kept calling. That was my first mistake. Not the calling itself, the believing that if I was present enough, persistent enough, eventually they'd feel it and lean back in. They didn't lean in. They got used to it. So I tried being useful. That was my second approach, and if I'm being honest with myself, it's the one I understood best. My whole life being useful was how I said I loved you. Fix the thing. Show up when it's hard. Be the one who handles it. I sent birthday cards with checks. I mailed things for the grandchildren, a book I thought Jordan might like, a small kit for Elijah, who's been into fixing things, some hair ribbons that reminded me of something I can't quite name anymore. I wanted them to open a package and think of me for a second. Maybe mention it. The thank yous came later, not at all. I started to wonder if the packages sat on the counter, just another item in the pile. Renee called once to say the check had arrived and thank you, Dad, that was sweet. She sounded like she was reading from something. I offered to help with the grandchildren, said I could take a few of them for a weekend, give the parents a break. Calvin said that was a generous offer, but they had it handled. Said it the way you say it when someone is offering something you never asked for. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I found a grocery bag once, one I'd sent with a few things inside when I visited Anthony back in the fall, sitting in his garage, untouched. Not thrown out, just set aside, like it would be dealt with eventually. I stared at it for a long moment and then picked up a wrench and went to look at the faucet he'd mentioned, because that's what I knew how to do when I didn't know what else to do. I drove home with the radio off. The third attempt was the one that finally broke something in me. I planned a dinner, real notice, 4 weeks ahead. I called each of them personally, said I'd cook everything. They didn't have to bring a thing, just show up. Saturday afternoon, 6 o'clock. I spent 2 days on it. Bought more than I needed, the way you do when you want the table to look like something. Got the good napkins out, the ones Lorraine kept in the bottom drawer and only let out when it mattered. Set 8 places. Marcus came, which I'm grateful for. He came early, actually, helped me with a few things in the kitchen, and we talked the way we always talk. Practical, easy, surface level, but warm enough. That part was good. Naomi came late. Walked in distracted, phone in her hand, apologized before she even said hello. She stayed about an hour. Her eyes were somewhere else most of it. Calvin texted at 5:30. Something came up, Dad. He'd make it up to me. He didn't say how. Teresa, Anthony, Renee, none of them came. Various reasons, all reasonable. Traffic, a sick kid, a previous thing they'd forgotten to mention. I'm not saying they were lying. I'm saying the table had 6 empty chairs and I sat across from Marcus pretending that was fine. After he left, I packed the food up, stacked the plates, folded the good napkins back into the drawer, and I stood in the kitchen for a long time before I could make myself move. I'd done everything right. I'd called, I'd tried, I'd cooked, I'd waited, I'd forgiven, I'd shown up in every way I knew how. And I had become, despite all of it, someone they didn't particularly need to get to. That was the moment something changed. Not dramatically, not with anger, just quietly, the way a decision forms when you stop arguing with what's already true. I stopped calling, not to punish anyone, not to make a point. I just couldn't keep doing it. Every call I made that went to voicemail, every short conversation with half their attention somewhere else, every invitation that disappeared into silence, they all cost something. And at 84, you become careful about what you spend. So I stopped. I let the phone sit. The first week was hard. I picked it up 3-4 times, started to dial, put it back down. There was this particular silence that moved into the apartment around the 3rd day that felt different from regular quiet, heavier, like absence had a texture. I want to be honest about that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it felt like relief right away. It felt like dropping the rope on something I'd been holding on to for years. Your arms don't know what to do at first. I went about my days, took my walk in the mornings, fixed a few things in the building. Daniel downstairs had a radiator making noise. I had a look at it one afternoon. He didn't ask, I just offered. Lucas was there, sitting on the floor doing something with a piece of bent metal, watching me work without saying much. Kid has a patience about him that I find easy to be around. We didn't talk a lot. There was nothing that needed saying. I started reading again. I'd let that go for a few years. Couldn't tell you why exactly. It just fell away. But I started again. Mornings especially, coffee and whatever was on the table. I sat by the window and watched the street. Ate my meals in peace. And somewhere around the 3rd week, I noticed something strange. I wasn't performing anymore. That sounds simple. It's not. For years, every call, every visit, every dinner, I'd been performing a version of myself designed to make them comfortable. Steady, uncomplaining, fine. Not wanting too much. Easy to manage from a distance. I'd made myself into something that didn't inconvenience anyone. And in doing that, I'd made myself into someone there was no particular reason to miss. Calvin called first. About 5 weeks in on a Wednesday. He sounded slightly off, that careful tone people use when they're not sure what they're walking into. I haven't heard from you, he said. I've been around, I said. There was a pause. Then he said, You all right, Dad? I'm fine, Calvin. Another pause. Longer. Can I come by this weekend? I said yes. He came Saturday afternoon and stayed for 3 hours. We sat in the living room, talked about things I'd half forgotten we had to talk about. He told me something about Malik that I'd never heard before, something from a few years back that he'd carried quietly. I listened. I didn't offer solutions. I just listened. He seemed surprised by that. I noticed him relax somewhere around the 2nd hour in a way he doesn't usually relax. When he stood up to go, he stood there a moment at the door and said, I'll come back next week, if that's all right. I said, sure. Marcus had already been coming, but he started coming differently, not out of duty, more curious, like he was trying to figure out what had shifted. Naomi called the week after Calvin's visit and said she'd been thinking about me. Said it plainly, which is Naomi's way. Said she wanted to come by and just sit for a while, not for any reason. I said, all right. She came and she did exactly that. We sat. I made coffee. She told me about something frustrating at work. I didn't fix it. We watched the street from the window for a while. She left saying she'd come back soon. She did. I've been thinking about why it worked, and I keep coming back to this. For years, I was the one holding the thread. Calling, planning, reaching, making it easy for them to stay connected without really having to choose it. I did all the work of presence so they didn't have to feel the weight of absence. And people, even people who love you, they'll take what's given freely. Not out of cruelty, just because they can. When I stopped holding the thread, they felt it go slack. And some of them, not all of them, not immediately, but some of them reached for it. What I didn't expect was what happened in the in-between, before anyone called. Those weeks when the phone was quiet and I wasn't waiting for it to ring. I started to feel like myself again. I don't mean happy. I mean settled, like the ground was level. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had been going toward managing their perception of me, making sure they didn't worry, making sure they didn't feel guilty, making sure I wasn't too much. When I stopped managing all of that, there was more of me left over, more than I'd had in a long time. I took stock of what I actually had. Daniel and Lucas downstairs. A neighbor named Patricia who brings me fruit from her garden sometimes and knocks without calling ahead, which I've come to appreciate. My walks, my books, a chair by the window that I've sat in long enough that it knows the shape of me. Small things, real things. I'm not going to tell you it replaced what I wanted from my children. It didn't, but it held me while I was waiting. And it reminded me that my life didn't begin and end with whether they showed up. Some of them are closer now. Calvin more than I expected. Naomi in her way. Marcus steady as always. Anthony calls more often, which isn't the same as visiting, but is something. Teresa, that's still tender. She and I have a history that doesn't untangle easily. But she called last month and we talked for longer than usual and I didn't push anything and neither did she. It was enough. They didn't come back because I played a trick. They came back because I stopped making myself easy to take for granted. Because when the call stopped, they had to answer a question they'd been avoiding. Is someone I care about out there living and I'm not in contact with them? Some of them didn't like the answer. The ones who came back, they come now like they want to, not like they owe me. There's a difference in the room when someone is present by choice. You can feel it. The air is different. I'm 84 years old. I've made most of my mistakes. I've carried most of my regrets long enough that they've worn smooth. They don't cut the way they used to, just sit there, familiar. And I'm grateful in the particular way you get grateful when you've lived long enough to see what gratitude is actually for. I'm grateful for the years that were hard, grateful for the ones that weren't, grateful for this apartment that stays quiet in the evenings, grateful I'm still here to sit in this chair, to watch the light change in the afternoon, to have had people to love, imperfectly, inadequately, but genuinely. Whatever time is left, I want to spend less of it performing and more of it just being. Less of it chasing and more of it living in a way that makes people want to walk through the door. My father used to say the quietest man in the room is often the one people are most curious about. He wasn't talking about relationships. He was talking about something else entirely. But I've thought about it a lot lately. If you're still here listening, thank you. I mean that. There's something I find difficult to describe about having someone sit with you through a whole story. It matters more than I usually let on. If you want to sit with me again sometime, I'll be here. Just hit subscribe. I'm not going anywhere yet.